Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to really thank Fabiola for inviting me here. It is the first time, I think, that we meet we do something together. Okay. I am an architect and a planner in terms of education, but I work in a regular, I would say, way with sociologists also and economists on cities. And I would introduce myself as an urban scholar, most of all. So, to be honest, I do not tackle the issue of tourism in more general terms since years. But I followed a number of PhD students which do PhD thesis on, for example, Airbnbification. So all the issue of Airbnb and the transformation of cities related to this phenomenon, this huge phenomenon, which in Rome is really relevant. So I prepared a presentation in which I would like to focus on one main issue. My idea is to critically reflect on the relationship between tourism and cities in the perspective of value production. And so the issue is what we mean by value and commodification of the urban space, considering what to do undesired situations such as over-tourism, which is, of course, is a huge phenomenon in most of Italian cities, but not just in Italy, imply, and which possible future direction should be explored. To do that, I would follow three main points. The first one is the historical roots of cities as touristic destinations. The second point is considering tourism and its unveiled contradictions. And then the third point will be devoted to reflect on the production of values in the city and the city considered as urban, bringing back a very old definition of Henri Lefebvre. First, the historical roots of cities as tourist destination. We have to, I think we all know that all the destinations in town were related to pilgrimages, market and commerce and craftsmanship, which are not shopping. So it's a little bit different. And education, for example, churches, monasteries, libraries, and also particular craftsmanship where people learn a job, learn to do something. These were the main the most important reasons why towns were. Tourism is not the right word. Why cities were frequented, were destination of mobility through territorial mobility. I think that you will remember that movie. This is in Florence, and this is a room with a view from the Forster book and the very good and very famous movie by James Ivory, which had highlight the big change that happened in between the 18, 19, and the beginning of the 20th century. The colleague, Mariella Innocenzi, also mentioned that the new phenomenon of the Grand Tour, in which was considered as part of the education program of aristocracy and wealthy bourgeois. Cities at that time, we have to be really careful about that. Cities were not the destinations. Cities were considered more or less the unavoidable context of monuments, museums, churches, and works of art. While the beginning of cultural tourism was related to those singular, those individual elements of the city, but not the city as a whole. and not considered as a vacation. To demonstrate that, I think it is sufficient to remember what Goethe or Hölderlin or all the very famous writers which wrote about the tourism in Italy, for example, wrote about Rome. They talk about Rome in a very bad way, saying that it was a place in which you can get sick, having malaria or something like that. And so cities were really considered as a kind of unavoidable context, something that you have to pay if you want to visit museums or works of art. And was not vacation, because vacation was something else. The same social classes like aristocracy and the wealthy bourgeoisie, which I mentioned it before, considered vacation the countryside, which was supposed to be the place to rest, or the coast or the mountains where you can do swimming or hiking or whatever, and practice sport. In the 20th century, in particularly after the post-World War, and more particularly after the economic boom which followed the Reconstruction, we started to talk about vacation in a more general terms. And it has been related as a kind of compensation of increasingly alienated workers. So the point was that the working conditions were so bad that all the workers were started to be considered as they have the right to rest, they have the right to do a vacation, and so related to this started what we call mass tourism. And so we can find a strict relationship between capitalist phases and tourism transformation, and in particular between 40s, post-40s, and the actual, in the current time. Cities are not the destination of mass tourism until the 80s and the 90s. They were destination of tourism, but not of mass tourism. The debate about heritage conservation led to the Gubbio Charter. This is a very important point in the urban planning and also the urban scholar literature and the history of urban scholarship, because through the Gubbio Charter, there was a main shift from single monuments to their environment. So the idea was that you cannot really protect one single monument, but you have to protect the environment in which it is within. And it is the context which produced the monument and gives sense to the monuments. So the context is maybe much more important than the single element. At the turn of the 21st century, we experienced a broad diversification of tourism and a broader interpretation of cultural tourism as well, related, for example, to movies, theaters, literature, music, but also food, which started and now currently is one of the more important reasons for cultural tourism. So what we interpret as culture also changed a lot through time. And tourism started to be considered increasingly as an overall experience, presented as a way of life, a way of living a different life, which means that you wanted to experience a different life from the one you usually have, and in a different place. So this is why cities became a major destination. And this was related also to development of low-cost travel, and also to the digital revolution, which is related also to platform economy and to Airbnb in particular. About the tourism and its unveiled is I don't know how much unveiled they are, but according to me, they are unveiled contradiction. The picture showed the Palazzo Ducale in Venice before and after the COVID pandemic, which is completely full of people. And the people which used to visit Venice do that in the same way in which you talked about Rome. So it's something like 2 nights and 2 nights and 3 days, and the people are sure, let's say, that they have seen everything that they have to see. Like it's like the prescription of the doctor. You have to see that, this, and this, and then okay, you are right. And when we consider these kind of unveiled contradiction, we have to think about the significance, which is still valid, although relative, about old concept, but I think that everybody mentioned them. The idea of carrying capacity, which emerged in the early 90s, to be true. And it was not related to, not immediately related to sustainability, but it was really related to tourism studies. And it was, but what I wanted to highlight is that the concept of carrying capacity leads us to think that it is a matter of quantity, while it is not just a matter of quantity, it is a matter of quality, even if this concept is very, very contentious, because in most of the cases, seems that the recipe to solve all this problem is to avoid mass tourism and to focus on a more elitist kind of tourism. In cities like Rome, this issue is very common. This is in this way the overall idea of tourism in the city is usually framed, and this is very, and according to me, this is very unjust. I think that reducing the number of tourists can be insufficient, and that tourism, not just this is the Mariella Nocenzi showed a picture saying that mass tourism consume and produce a kind of exploitation, but according to me, it is not just mass tourism related to exploitation, but tourism in itself is can be, or in most of the cases is, a kind of exploitation, and tend to consume the same value which determine and feed it. Which means that the reason why tourists came to Rome is to see and to be part of an environment that they are contributing to destroy. And if we don't find a balance between these two different orientations, there will be no policy, no intervention which can be of some help. This is also, I think, this image is very I think that we can discuss a lot about these two pictures. On your right side, you have Bellini at the end of the 15th century, which showed Piazza San Marco full of people queuing, as it happens today. But the reasons are very different. In the first case, it was the Holy Cross ceremony, and in the other case are regular tourists that probably don't even know what they are looking at. So
3 minutes. Is that okay?
Was not 20?
With questions.
Okay.
And comments,
okay.
Possible.
So which values are produced by tourists? First of all, tourism is actually producing values. In most of the case, we think about tourism as a monetary value. Other values are often ignored. For example, the relationship between people coming from different countries is, in most of the cases, ignored because there is not enough time to really interact and to really getting to know each other. So these kind of values, which according to me would be the kind of values which will produce and reproduce value in the city, are in most of the cases, ignored or completely set aside, mainly because of time. Tourism determines unequal competition within the city and not just between cities. And one of the most important issues is short-term rental, which are usually more profitable than long-term rentals. So in cities like Rome or Venice, but also in Florence and in most of historical cities, real estate owners tend to use their properties to be put in the short-term market, and with this provoke the expulsion of the inhabitants. Housing market changes to respond to tourist demand instead of that of inhabitants, and retail and commerce follows, because retail and commerce tend to be adequate to respond to the demand of tourists instead of the inhabitants. And tourism tends to oust ordinary inhabitants and their activities, which are constitutively part of the urban environment that tourists want to experience. This is also a very incredible comparison. On your left side, you have a picture from John Ruskin in the late 19th century. And the other picture is, I made it in March 2021 during the second lockdown in Venice. The square was completely empty. And this, according to many people, politicians and policymakers would have learned something about the COVID pandemic, also about the economy of tourism, but this didn't happen to be true. So what I wanted to point out is that similarly to any other monoculture, like in agriculture, cities cannot live on tourism. And I would like to finish with a comment on the previous speeches. So we have to ask ourselves first, who will continue reproducing heritage values? History is not the past. I think that we have to consider that very carefully. History is not the past. Historical cities are those cities where the stratification of time and of activities and of value prevail against, let's say, the current, the nowadays use, and they are the defining feature of historical cities, but they are not the past. They are to continue to be reconstructed. Values must be built and constructed again. Tourism policies are essential, first of all concerning housing, and they cannot be simply negative policies such as prohibitions, but they have to be proactive and active policies. And tourism policies must be accompanied or counterbalanced by with housing policies in historical cities as main goal, since a main goal should be that of bringing inhabitants and artisanship back to the historical city center in order to have a really lived city. I would like to end with this very short comment, which is like a provocation. It is related to the picture that Fabiola shows regarding the hierarchy of a touristic city. And I would say that Milan, that we compare to Rome, as well as London or Paris and much more New York or Hong Kong, they are not tourist city. They are chosen as a tourist destination because they live of other things. They are cities that can live also without tourism. They have their own urban economy, and they are chosen mostly because they are lived cities. While Rome, as well as Venice, stopped producing values. They have been, since many years, too much concerned in finding ways of consuming the values of the past instead of producing new values. So this is a provocation that I would like to do in order to conclude my own presentation, but also to link with the presentation of Fabiola and the presentation of Mariella, which I appreciated very much. But I think that we have to change a little bit the perspective about what a tourist city is. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.